Hey guys, it's Mitch. How's it going? We are getting down to the final couple of issues of the Alan Moore Wildcats run. We've been on this train for a long ass time. We're going to see it through to the end. We're taking a look today at Wildcats number 33. So a very brief bit of catch up first. The deal with this is that the old Wildcats team has returned from space, essentially broken and no longer a team. The new Wildcats team that was set up in their place, which features Mr. Majestic, Savant, Tau, and Lady Tron, are in the midst of a gang war and are trying to suppress it. The old Wildcats team showed up just in time to help them out, and everyone has just realized that the mastermind behind everything is in fact Tau, who was on the new Wildcats team. It wasn't like I was working against you the whole time kind of thing. Not exactly. Wasn't even I was going to take over the world kind of thing. It was just kind of, he was messing around. The whole thing with Tau is that he's got some kind of enhancements that give him ridiculously enhanced intellect. And he was thinking, can I build myself a superhero army, and how would that go? So we're kind of coming to the end of that scheme. So let's get into it. We can start with the cover here. We are now well out of the Travis Charest era for Wildcats books. Jim Lee isn't helping out on this either. This is down to Matt Broom, who's kind of a newcomer, at least to Wildcats. And we don't have a bad cover here at all, I'd say. Got kind of a classic idea with Maul versus Slag. And then Tau down here at the bottom as the antagonist. Bit of a weird face, but that seems to be kind of Matt Broom's deal, where he just comes up with some weird faces. With the arms here, with the underlighting, there's some good stuff going on there. Same with on Slag. Yeah, no, that's not badly executed by any means. Matt Broom's in a little bit of a tough position because he is following up on Travis Charest and Jim Lee. Those are the two who've been drawing it most often recently. Ryan Benjamin's been subbing in occasionally, but Ryan Benjamin's been subbing in on every Wildstorm book around this time, I think. So we're starting out with Savant. So at the end of the last issue, Grifter was about to shoot Tau because they had just figured out who the mastermind was, and Savant kind of teleported in front of the bullet right at the last second because Tau had been manipulating her for the last little while to the point where she was completely devoted to him, and she took the bullet for him, and he just kind of walked away. So now Zealot is going to do some field medicine here. I think my initial objection was like, does Zealot really know anything about field medicine? It's like, well, she's millennia old. She's probably picked up a trick or two. I think I can get on board with that. And Lady Tron's helping out as well. All three of these were all bickering with each other constantly until Savant got shot. So this has kind of been a case of putting aside grievances so that we can deal with the current crisis. Lady Tron raises an interesting point. She's like, I thought you space chicks were like totally invulnerable, the way Majestic is. And Zealot's like, well, Majestic's different. He's enhanced. Which is the first time that's been brought up. But Savant and Zealot, she's like, yeah, no, we're extremely tough, for sure, but nowhere near invulnerable, and Grifter was using armor-piercing shells. So we're in kind of a tough spot to start out here. Our page design here, interesting design, looks a little bit like some of the stuff Travis Charest was doing when the old Wildcats team was back on the Caribbean homeworld. Of course, since this is an Alan Moore book, we don't know whether or not these pages were designed by Alan Moore. He did tend to do that quite a bit. If he did this one, it's not a bad design by any means, and finish is, pretty good. Not spectacular, but all right. That's a little bit better, really, as the Wildcats team are getting ready to go and hunt down Tau. So this is in the Halo building. They've managed to lock the building down so there are no exits. Or at least, no apparent exits. There's probably somewhere that he can escape from, but all the obvious ones are out anyway. Grifter's kind of starting to give orders, which is interesting, considering he wasn't in the book for a long period, but he has seemed to have kind of taken point here. Probably in part because if he doesn't, Spartan will, and him and Spartan are kind of having a bit of a spat right now because Spartan's personality has been augmented, kind of. It was more like the original Spartan was like experiencing amnesia, and his baseline personality was actually a millennia-old cherubim who fought alongside Emp and Zealot. So now that's re-emerged, and they're kind of button heads and everything, particularly since, the Spartan core personality, John Colt, and Zealot seem to be rekindling their romance. And, when they're trying to figure out which way to go, naturally they're going to keep kind of picking at each other. Grifter's eventually just like, I don't give a shit. Do what you want. I'm going to go find her by myself. And we got a weird close-up here on Fuji. I mean, it's a good shot. but he doesn't say anything, which is odd. I'd say most of these shots aren't too bad. I do like this splash here. This is well executed. This is already a little bit better than what we saw out of Matt Broom like an issue or two ago. And yeah, the shot of Fuji down here, I do like that quite a bit, actually. This is a little bit later on in the Stormwatch continuity. I think this would probably have to be after Warren Ellis has taken over, because I think I recognize this outfit. And I wasn't reading the latter issues of Stormwatch, but I did read the Warren Ellis run. So we're going to follow along with Fuji first, and he's going to stumble upon Tao almost immediately. And you figure, like, Fuji versus Tao should be an extremely short fight. And it would be, except that he's going to pull out some weird kind of mind control shit. I'm not sure exactly what he does. Basically, it's like he gets him running in rhetorical circles, to the point where it breaks his brain. You know, we get Fuji looming over Tao in a pretty goddamn good shot here, really. That's nice and dramatic looking. That's great. And he says, so I have found you. You are the one called Tao, and I regret that I must detain you by force if that is necessary. Tao responds with, a response we're going to hear quite a bit of in the next little bit, which is, force? Oh, come now, what's happening? Who am I? Let us reason together. Fuji's like, we have nothing to reason about. Tao goes, oh, you're so wrong. We have so much in common. Human consciousness is a shared phenomenon we do not know we're sharing. Essentially, there is only one human mind. Don't you agree, Tao? And Fuji goes, well, no, you're Tao, I'm Fuji. And Tao says, agreed, I'm Fuji. I remember thinking that when I awoke in my room at Stormwatch HQ this morning, and I looked at the Hosakai print. I remember thinking something similar age 10 when my grandmother took me to Hiroshima that first time. And then he starts talking like he's getting confused. He's like, grandmother, yes, I remember we laid down flowers. What are you doing to me? Which is what he also said when Fuji came in. And Fuji kind of goes back to where he was when Fuji came in. He's like, so I have found you. You're the one called Tao, and I regret that I must detain you by force if that's necessary. And we keep kind of running in these circles here. And I assume there must be some kind of mind control element or hypnosis, something like that, to go along with just the rhetorical, like, labyrinth that they're running here. You know, this time Tao's like, on a quantum level, both we and space-time are made of precisely nothing. Don't you agree, Fuji? And Fuji repeats his response from earlier, which is, no, you're Fuji, I'm Tao. And Tao goes, agreed, I'm Tao. And they get back to Tao repeating what he was saying when Fuji first entered, so Fuji has to repeat his response again. It's an interesting little exercise, and it does give Matt Broom a chance to just kind of photocopy a couple of panels over and over again. I don't entirely buy it, because there has been no mention that Tao has any kind of telepathic ability or like anything even remotely like that. So if we're going just based off the idea that, you know, he's saying things that are confusing, I don't think that does it. That's why I think that, you know, there has to be a bit more to it than that, but we're never really going to get that illuminated. I do like the idea quite a bit that, you know, Tao obviously can't deal with somebody like Fuji physically, and he doesn't have any kind of powers that make up for that kind of thing. He's just incredibly intelligent. So that's his weapon, is he's going to use his intelligence against these other heroes. And I think that's represented about as well as it can be here, really, unless you are some kind of hyper-intelligent writer. And if you are, you're probably not writing comic books. You know, Jim Lee's paying well. I don't know that he's paying that well. So now we're going to cut back to Maul and Warblade. They're their own unit. They're searching separately. Warblade's like, did you hear a scream? Maul's like, I don't know. Why don't we check down this way? And the way that they're going to go is actually to the holding pens, where the new Wildcats team has been incarcerating supervillains, which is not something the old team ever did. And when they get in there, they find that Attica and Slag have been released by Tao, which kind of makes you wonder, like, is this why Tao was incarcerating supervillains? You know, just set them up in some kind of VR prison where they're in like a dream state. That on its own, it's like, I don't know if that's really anything Tao feels is necessary exactly, particularly when he didn't have a problem killing Harm at the beginning of the Alan Moore run. So I get the feeling he was hoarding supervillains just in case he ever needed to make a quick escape from the Halo building. This was to slow down pursuers. And I mean, the fight itself, it's going to be just kind of a standard issue fight, really, as Maul and Warblade kind of slowly work it out that that's what's happening. They are tossing slag all over the place. Slag, of course, is kind of made out of like volcanic rock or something similar. He does have like magma for blood. And the heat in the room keeps rising to the point where the sprinklers come on. That doesn't really help anything, though, because that just creates this kind of blanket of steam around everything, which Slag, of course, uses for cover so he can get in close and hammer Warblade here. which is nice. I always like when a fight has something that sets it apart from like a standard issue fight. You know, where the background kind of interacts with the fight. Doesn't happen nearly often enough. Slag and Attica are talking back and forth because that's what you do in these things. You talk back and forth while you fight. And they're like, this is messed up. I'm not sure if this is still... I could still be in my dream state jail right now. And Slag's like, wait a minute, I know why. Why are we fighting the old Wildcats? They're supposed to be dead. Because that's what everybody figures. When they originally went off to the Caribbean homeworld, everybody thought that the ship they were on exploded in space. So that adds to the unreality of things where they're not entirely sure if it's real. But they figure, you know what, it feels real enough. Let's just finish killing these guys, and then we can decide whether or not things are actually solid. And that's when Spartan comes through the roof and, kind of disposes of Slag here. Not a bad idea for a panel or anything. I don't know about the execution because it doesn't look like he actually hit him with anything. But whatever, that's fine. Alan Moore's going to hit him with some kind of awkward dialogue. As Attica yells, oh no, they're all still alive, it's Spartan. And Spartan goes, nope, not Spartan. Things have changed since you went to sleep. My name's John Colt. 60 years ago, they called me the man of brass. Now I guess I'm a man of quartz, and you can call me Judgment. It's like, okay, that was more exposition than I think anybody really needed. And Slag has heard of John Colt, but he was like an adventurer 60 years ago. And he's like, man, whatever's going on in the real world, it's even more messed up than what was going on in the dream loop. How do we just, get the fuck out of here? And, they burn a hole in the wall, and they're just going to split. It's like, we get nothing to gain from fighting these guys. These weren't even the guys who put us away. We don't have a current beef going right now. And they're just going to run. Maul and Warblade think about going after them for a second, but Spartan's like, no, that's what Tau wants. While I'm sure he would have been fine with Attica and Slag killing everybody who found them, he would have been expecting that whatever Wildcats were fighting them would chase after them if they did escape, which would take more pursuers off of his tail. So no, we're going to stay in the building and we're going to go and find that little rat. So anyway, the rest of the Wildcats come through at that point, Grifter, Void, and Majestic, because they could hear the battle from clear over on the other side of the building. And they're going to do a little bit of triage. Majestic's going to fix up the wall. And they're going to get back to that scream that they heard just before the fight broke out. And they're like, I don't know what that was. It wasn't Slag or Attica. And Grifter keeps walking here for a second while they go back and forth. They're like, was it male or female? I was like, I think it was male, but all the guys are here, aren't we? Or did we forget somebody? Because it wasn't a Wildcats member that disappeared, right? Eventually they get around to, there were the Stormwatch people, right? What about, And that's when Grifter, he's still looking around and he finds them. And it's Fuji, and Fuji, his brain is broken. He just keeps kind of repeating that conversation that he was having with Tau over and over again, only he's doing it all by himself now. Get a big old splash page. Fuji looks great. Everybody around him, less so, but Fuji is the focus of the shot, so that's okay. Pretty good metal textures. Nice shadows, particularly along the arm here. There's some good stuff going. I will say, never got into Strangers in Paradise. And images like this weren't going to convince me that was something I should do. Come check out Strangers in Paradise, where naked girls eat leaves. So Void is going to teleport Fuji to medical facilities so that they can at least try and look after him a little bit. Although, given that all the damage seems to be psychological, it's going to be a little tough to get him out of his shell now. And the rest of the team is starting to realize, the kind of mind they're up against. Fuji wasn't their biggest gun, but he was a pretty big gun. And Tau reduced him to a whimpering wreck, right? They're talking it over here. Majestic's like, Tau seems to have no powers, yet his mind may be more sophisticated than we imagine. Grifter's like, I think it's a little bit further than that. I think he's more sophisticated than we can imagine. He just doesn't have powers that we can understand or recognize. We don't even have a concept for what he is. So all they can do is find him and hope they get the drop on him, essentially. I gotta say, Alan Moore's done a pretty good job of building Tau up to be a formidable villain, considering he doesn't seem to have apparent powers. It's kind of that Ozymandias sort of villain, right? Except, Ozymandias had an empire behind him, so there was that. Tau's whole thing really is just that he's the smartest guy in the room. Yeah, I guess between him and Ozymandias, that is kind of one of Alan Moore's favorite go-to ultra villains. So now we gotta check back in on Tau. It's been a couple pages, right? And Tau has made his way to the hangar. So that is one way he could potentially escape, and it looks like The craft that he's got set up here, it is aimed right for the window that's at the top of the Halo building. That's not the worst idea, I suppose, when there are no other ideas that you could pursue. And he's about to get in, only he's got somebody waiting for him, and it's Lady Tron. So she actually put 2 and 2 together that if he couldn't get out on the ground floor, he might try to make it to the hangar. So, hey, she actually got kind of smart for a second there. But Lady Tron's like, I've been working forward to this since we first met when you blew that smack all over me. And then there's the stuff you did to Savant. And Tao's like, Savant was just a useful pawn that required sacrificing to the greater game. But you, Maxine, you're different. Come on, let's reason together. Kind of repeating the Fuji route. And Max is like, oh wow, I'm getting like swirly patterns in my eyes. It's your strange abilities to influence the way rational beings think, which totally doesn't work on really, really stupid people. As she takes a swing at him and knocks him on his ass. So that's a fun twist. You got your end-of-the-world villain here whose whole deal is that he can out-reason everybody, and then he comes up against somebody who's just too dumb for that to work against. And she's yelling like, well, come on, tell me about particle physics. Then I'm like, whoa, what is reality? Tao's like, what are you going to do then? You going to call the others? And Lady Tron's like, nope, I'm going to save you all for myself, which is, kind of her main mistake there. She really should have called for the others. And that's when Tao throws her off by bringing up the fact that her dad abused her when she was a child, which is a gross and weird place to take this superhero comic. We're trying to get a little bit more mature, I suppose, than your standard Marvel superhero fare. And, we're pretending we're more mature anyway. And you can see how a character like Maxine, who is like a spree killer / spree robber, criminal, whatever, this comic is still too much of a superhero book to put that in here, I think. I don't think that's appropriate, particularly considering we're just going to throw it out there and then forget about it. He puts it out there just to kind of throw her off for a second, which, it does. She's like, how do you know about that? And I never told anybody about that. And the whole point was just so Tao could get closer so that he could sneak his hand up, in between her workings and grab the coolant system and disconnect the liquid nitrogen that was supplying her core. And, in theory, I think it's all... I don't know. I guess it would have been up to Jim Lee to say, yeah, it's okay if you want to go ahead with that. And, we're showing that the character of Tao is extremely intelligent and also, completely amoral. Doesn't mind using whatever's at his disposal to try and get an edge. At the same time, I don't think this is that kind of superhero world. This isn't Watchmen. This isn't even Invincible. I think it would be a little bit more appropriate in Invincible. I still don't think it's the kind of thing that should end up there, but... Anyway, moving on from that, we do get the big splash page with the not particularly dynamic image. But, considering how few backgrounds Matt Broom's been drawing the last few pages, in that he hasn't been drawing, any, I'm getting the impression he might be having to go a little fast to try and make his deadline here. So, of course, when you're having to go faster, you're getting tired, you're not going to have as much time to devote to figuring out what a good page layout might be. I was just like, okay, no, here's the action happening. Lady Tron at first doesn't even know what exactly just happened. She's like, what did you just do? I'm all frozen up. What is this stuff? Because she starts leaking something. We don't see it. We're kind of taking Alan Moore's word for it, but she's leaking some kind of goop. Tao's like, it's liquid nitrogen. I disconnected your cooling system. You really should try to find out more about yourself. Then you'd understand what you're powered by and why you need a cooling system. Anyway, see ya. And he walks away. And that's when the rest of the Wildcats team teleports in because they heard the noise. I'm not sure what noise they heard. I guess there was a little bit of a scuffle. Or whatever. Maybe they were just around the corner or something and they just teleported in to save a little bit of time. Let's say that's what was going on. And they're like, so what's happening? Where's Tao? And she's like, Tao was here and he pulled this tube out of me and covered me in this gunk and I can't move. And he's talking about cooling systems and what I'm powered by. And Grifter's like, cooling system? Oh, fuck, no, she's not powered. She's not, right? Majestic's like, I don't know. I've never looked into it, but I suppose it's possible. She's like, what? What the fuck am I powered by? Because, she's not smart. She's kind of dumb. She can't put it together by herself, and it kind of helps anyway, because that's the kind of thing that's probably best to actually state outright to the audience. And Grifter and Majestic are like, we're pretty sure you're powered by a nuclear reactor of some kind, and if Tao just disconnected the coolant, that means you're heading for an overload, which means you're essentially a living bomb now. And we end with the last shot, the splash page here, with the Anguish Maxine which, you know, again, not the best executed, not as well executed as the shots earlier on. Remember how well the shots were executed earlier on? Those were pretty good. So I think that's the what we have to judge Matt Broom on, more so than this, where I think he's having to go pretty fast. But that is the end of Wildcats number 33. I think that's a pretty good ending for the comic, where, you know, Tao has kind of pulled out a last trump card. Really. Probably something he would have filed away long time ago as a possible tactic that could be used. And it's not exactly like they can treat it like Slag and Attica running away from the Halo building. They kind of have to deal with the, impending nuclear explosion. So overall, pretty good issue. Good issue in that we finally saw what Tao can do, because Tao has kind of been built up as this strategic genius this entire time. And, you know, you've had the odd person say he's the most dangerous one of us all. At least I'm pretty sure somebody said that. So if you're reading it at the time, you're probably thinking, okay, so what does that mean? Does he know, like, pressure points, like nerve clusters for when he attacks, so to just, like, incapacitate people? It's like, no, he breaks your brain with rhetoric loops and brings up inappropriate trauma. So at least we're past that now. We can shake it off, and next issue we can go all the way through the climax without having to worry about it. And when we do that, that'll bring us to the end of the Alan Moore Wildcats run. So make sure you're here for Wildcats 34 when I drop that video. For this one, though, that is going to do it. So thanks very much for watching, guys. If you got this far, don't forget to hit like, hit the subscribe button. And right about now, you should be seeing a link to my Patreon. So if you want, you can go check that out, too. But yeah, that's going to do it. Thanks again for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.